The morning it all began, I didn't think anything was different. I woke up to the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen, the sound of my husband humming under his breath as he prepared breakfast. We had our usual rhythm, him reading the news on his tablet, me scrolling through my phone, our legs brushing under the table as we sipped from mismatched mugs. It was comfortable, predictable, the kind of quiet love that comes from years of shared routines. He kissed me on the forehead before leaving for work, telling me he might be late because of a big project deadline. I didn't question it. Why would I? We had been married for 7 years, and if there was one thing I was certain of, it was his honesty. At least that's what I thought. It wasn't until later that afternoon when I stopped by the grocery store that I noticed something odd. I had grabbed his jacket from the back seat of the car because I was cold, and as I slipped my hand into the pocket, my fingers brushed against something stiff like a folded piece of paper. I pulled it out absent-mindedly, expecting maybe a receipt from lunch. It was a receipt, all right, but it wasn't from anywhere nearby. It was from a small toy shop in a neighborhood we never visit, one that's an hour away. And the date wasn't from yesterday or last week. It was from this morning. I felt a strange flicker in my chest. It wasn't exactly suspicion yet, more like a question that wouldn't fully form. I slipped the receipt back into his pocket, my mind already making excuses for him. Maybe it was for a coworker's kid? Maybe he'd stopped on his way to work. For some reason, still the thought lingered, scratching at the edges of my peace. That night when he came home, he seemed more tired than usual, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. He didn't mention the toy store, and I didn't ask. For the first time in our marriage, I caught myself wondering if I should. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about that receipt. It wasn't even the store itself that bothered me, it was the way it didn't fit anywhere in the puzzle of our life. We didn't have children, and none of our friends' kids. Had birthdays coming up? Go for coffee. I tried to bring it up casually. Did you go anywhere interesting yesterday? I asked, keeping my voice light. He didn't even look up from his phone. Just work. Why? My stomach tightened. Not because I caught him in a light lease, not a blatant one, but because of how easily the answer came out. No flicker of memory, just a clean, easy no. That night, when he fell asleep, I lay awake beside him, staring at the shadows on the ceiling. I told myself I was overthinking. People forget things all the time. But deep down, something had shifted. It's like noticing the first hairline crack in a fascia. No, it's still holding together. But now you can't stop wondering when it will break. The next day, while he was in the shower, I picked up his jacket again. The receipt was gone. That could mean nothing, I told myself. He could have thrown it away. But the fact that I noticed, the fact that I cared, meant everything. By the end of the week, I was watching him in ways I never had before. The late nights at the office, the sudden urgency to check his phone in another room, the way he seemed distracted even when we were together, it all started stacking up. And then came the text. I was reaching for the TV remote on the couch when his phone buzzed beside me. I wasn't snooping, I swear I wasn't, but my eyes caught the preview before I could look away. It was just a short message from an unsaved number. He's asking when you'll visit again. My hands went cold. I put the phone back exactly where it was and stared at the blank TV screen, my own reflection looking back at me. I didn't know who he was, but I knew I was going to find out. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, but that text kept echoing in my head. He's asking when you'll visit again. It didn't sound like work. It didn't sound like a casual friend. God, it sounded personal, and personal meant what, exactly? That Saturday, I pretended to have plans with a friend so I could stay home while he went into the office again. The second the door closed, I grabbed his laptop from the study. My heart was hammering so hard it was making my fingers tremble. His email was locked behind a password. I didn't know he'd always used one, but now it felt less like privacy and more like a wall. I tried guessing a few combinations, but nothing worked. I felt sick. It was like the air in the room had thickened. That's when I thought of something else, our shared bank account. I pulled it up on my phone, scrolling through recent transactions. There they were, small charges, nothing flashy, coffee shops, gas stations, restaurants, but all in a part of town we never go to. I checked the dates. Every one of them matched the days he'd claimed to be working late. A map was forming in my mind, dotted with places that didn't belong to our life. I didn't know if I was looking at proof of an affair or something else entirely, but I knew one thing: I needed to see where he went. The next Thursday, I told him I had a late meeting at work. Instead, I parked my car 2 blocks from his office and waited. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white.
Ow.
When he finally appeared, he wasn't alone. A woman wasn't with him there. Was no romantic stroll, no furtive glances. Instead, he walked quickly down the street, glancing over his shoulder once, as if to check for traffic, then turning into a narrow side street. I followed on foot, staying far enough back to blend with the few pedestrians. That's when I saw him stop in front of a small brick building, a school. My stomach lurched. Through the fence, I could see a group of children playing. One of them, a boy, looked up at him and grinned. My husband's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. My world tilted on its axis. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, my breath clouding in the air as I watched him kneel down to hug the boy. It wasn't the kind of polite hug you give. A friend's kid. It was fierce, full of warmth, like he'd been waiting all day for that moment. I couldn't move, couldn't blink. My mind was running in every direction at once. Who was this child? Why had my husband never told me about him? My first instinct was to storm over and demand answers, but something in the way they looked at each other stopped me. There was a tenderness there, an unspoken understanding, as if they shared a world I couldn't see. After a few minutes, he stood, ruffled the boy's hair, and walked him inside. I stayed in the shadows, my pulse pounding in my ears, until he came back out alone and headed down the street. My legs carried me the opposite way, almost on autopilot. I couldn't go home right away. I needed time to breathe, to think, to stop shaking. That night, I tried to act normal. I sat at the table, eating takeout and talking about nothing: traffic, the weather, a funny video he'd seen online. Words felt stiff in my mouth. Every time I looked at him, all I could see was the image of him smiling down at that boy. I wanted to ask God, I wanted to scream the question into the space between us, but instead, I tested him, gently. Anything interesting happened today? I asked, sipping my drink like it was a casual inquiry. Same old, he said, not missing a beat. He was good at this, too good.
What?
The lie slid out like water. That's when I knew I wouldn't get the truth by asking. I would have to take it, and the next time he went to see the boy, I would be ready. Section 5. The truth unfolds the following week. I didn't bother pretending I had plans. I told him I wasn't feeling well and would stay home while he wrapped up at the office. The second his car disappeared down the street, I grabbed my keys and followed at a distance, keeping far enough back that he wouldn't notice the same vehicle trailing him. It felt like something out of a crime drama. Every turn he took sent my heart pounding harder. He drove across town, past neighborhoods I'd never been to, until we reached that same small brick school. I parked a block away and slipped out on foot. From behind a cluster of trees, I watched him wait by the gate. The bell rang, and children poured out, their laughter filling the chilly air. And then I saw him, the boy from before, running straight toward my husband. This time, I got a closer look. He had dark hair like my husband's, the same deep-set eyes, even the same dimple in his left cheek when he smiled. The resemblance hit me like a punch to the gut. My husband crouched to catch him, lifting him briefly off the ground before setting him down. They talked for a moment, the boy holding up a drawing like he was proud of it. My husband tucked it carefully into his bag and the boy beamed. I followed them as discreetly as I could. When they left the school together, they walked to a nearby park where they sat on a bench eating ice cream, even though it was too cold for it. They laughed, they talked, they were comfortable, like this was a regular thing, like they had done it 100 times before. And that's when I realized this wasn't just some random child he was helping or mentoring. This was his child. My knees felt weak, my vision blurring at the edges. I had to sit down on a bench across the path, my body trembling from more than the cold. My husband had a son, and I was the last person to know. The walk back to my car felt like moving through thick water. My thoughts kept looping. How long? Who's the mother? Why didn't he tell me? I'd known my husband for almost a decade. We'd been married for 7 years. There had been no gaps, no mysterious absences, no hidden corners at least. I thought there hadn't. That night, while he showered, I sat on the edge of our bed scrolling through old photos on my phone. Every trip, every birthday, every holiday, we were together. But I noticed something I'd never paid attention to before. There were always certain afternoons he was busy or helping a friend. A pot of time they'd seemed harmless. Now, they were red flags waving in the wind. I dug deeper, pulling out the box of keepsakes from our early days together. Ticket stubs, handwritten notes, random mementos. At the bottom, I found an old envelope postmarked 8 years ago, addressed to him in handwriting I didn't recognize. My stomach twisted. Inside was a short note. He's beautiful. Thought you should know. No name, no return address. Just those 7 words and a small photo of a newborn swaddled in a hospital blanket. The baby's face was turned slightly, but I could see the tiny dimple in his left cheek. My hands shook as I held the photo. The timeline clicked into place. This boy wasn't the result of something recent he'd been in my husband's life. The entire time we'd been married, and he'd chosen to keep him in the shadows. The betrayal wasn't just in the secret. It was in the deliberate erasing of this child from my world. I wasn't sure yet if I was more furious or heartbroken. But I knew I was done waiting for the truth to come to me. I was going to take it no matter what it cost. 2 days later, I couldn't keep the storm inside me any longer. It was eating at my sleep, my appetite, my ability to even look at him without feeling that twisting knot of rage and hurt. He came home late again, his coat smelling faintly of cold air and something sweet ice cream, maybe.
Yeah.
I was waiting at the kitchen table, the old envelope and photo laid neatly in front of me like evidence in a trial. We need to talk, I said, my voice low but steady. His eyes flicked to the photo, and for the first time since this began, I saw him falter. He didn't sit down, didn't speak right away. Just stood there, shoulders tense, mouth pressed into a thin line. "Where did you get that?" he asked finally. I didn't answer.
Oh.
I wanted him to fill the silence. The pause stretched so long I thought I'd break first, but then he sighed and sat across from me. "His name is Daniel," he said quietly. Hearing the boy's name hit me harder than I expected. It made him real in a way nothing else had. My husband's voice shook as he spoke. "He's my son." I didn't know about him until after we were already together. His mother didn't want me involved at first, and when she finally changed her mind, I didn't know how to tell you. My hands curled into fists in my lap. "You've had years," I said, my voice sharper now. "Years, and you still didn't tell me." His gaze dropped to the table. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid you'd leave. Afraid you'd see me differently? The worst part? I didn't know if I saw him differently because of Daniel, or because of the man who had lied to my face for nearly a decade. In that moment, I realized nothing would ever go back to how it was. The crack in the vase had split wide open, and we were both staring at the pieces on the floor. Section. Ultimatums and aftermath, the days that followed were a tangled mess of silence, arguments and tentative attempts at understanding. Daniel's existence was a constant shadow hovering over us, reshaping everything I thought I knew about our marriage. We tried counseling, but the sessions often spiraled into blaming and recriminations. I needed honesty. He needed forgiveness. But bridging that gap seemed impossible. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, I laid everything out. "I can't live like this, half in the dark, half in suspicion. If we're going to move forward, you have to be completely open. No more secrets." He nodded slowly, exhaustion etched on his face. "I promise." But promises alone weren't enough. Over the next weeks, he introduced me to Daniel slowly, first with pictures, then a weekend visit. Watching him with his son was both beautiful and heartbreaking. I saw a side of my husband I'd never truly known. Tender, protective, imperfect. Slowly, the resentment inside me softened, replaced by a cautious hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were hurt feelings, broken trust, and difficult conversations ahead. But maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild. not by erasing the past, but by accepting it. As I tucked into bed one night, my phone buzzed. A message from Liam. Thank you for trying, for staying. I love you. I smiled, feeling the fragile stirrings of a new beginning. Months passed, and slowly, life began to settle into a new rhythm, one that included Daniel, and one where honesty no longer felt like a fragile luxury, but a daily necessity. Our family was different now, redefined by truths once hidden, but no less real. I learned to navigate the complexities of Steve's motherhood with tentative grace, recognizing that love isn't always simple or neat. It's messy, it's complicated, and sometimes it demands more patience than I thought I had. Liam and I grew stronger through the cracks in our marriage, building a foundation not on perfection, but on resilience and trust. We made plans not just for weekends with Daniel, but for a future where our past no longer dictated our happiness. At one point, I caught myself laughing at a silly joke Daniel made at dinner, and I realized I had come to love him not as a secret, but as part of the family we were creating together. The road ahead would have its challenges. Sure, there would be awkward moments, misunderstandings, and days when the weight of the past threatened to drag us down. But beneath it all was something powerful, a commitment to face those challenges together. As I looked around our home, filled with the joyful noise of a family once fractured but now healing, I felt a quiet pride. We had survived the storm, not by hiding from the truth, but by embracing it, and, in that embrace, we found something far more precious. Hope. Asterisk.